Shabbat shalom. So I'm in the midst of a spiritual crisis. Have I shared that with you? No worries. I don't want you to be worried.
We just hired you.
Spiritual crises are good for rabbis. It's like having enough fiber in your diet. You know, it's like...
Wait a year, then you have...
Then I have the crisis. I'm serious. You want rabbis to have these sort of like spiritual crises because the truth is if you take spiritual ideas seriously, and I do, and if you recognize that your ideas are imperfect, as mine are, then you have to perforce surrender to the idea that you need to grow, that what you think, what you understand has to grow. And you can surround yourself with ideas like a shell, but ultimately if it starts to sort of get tight in there, what you have to do is you have to molt. You have to grow a new one and find a new way of experiencing the world. And that happens to me a lot. And by the way, this spiritual crisis is not about God this week. It's not about Torah or Judaism recently. This crisis is about, God help me, the moral nature of the world. Just a small topic for Friday night. Because I get that the moral arc of the universe is long, but I've been on this part of the ride before, and I was hoping we wouldn't have to come back here. And as there's sort of this bevy of global crises, really like impressive problems that we're facing, I think the thing that sticks with me the most is that in almost every example I can think of, we have been here before and somehow we're choosing to be back here again. And I get why maybe you would send your kid to the creepy summer camp with the legend about the guy in the hockey mask running around once. But why would you sign them up a second time? I want to tell you that the moral framework with which you have to see the world is incredibly important, maybe more than any of us realize. It's not an abstract idea. It's not something that you just sort of discuss in moments of philosophical reflection or over a Shabbos table or at Oneg or something like that. It really, really matters because the way you see the world is the way that you will act within it. The way that you understand the righteousness and brokenness of the world is the way that you will walk through it. If you think what the world needs is education, you will teach it. If you think what the world needs is compassion, you will attempt to give it and to hold people for where they need to be. If what you think the world needs is food and sustenance, you will try to feed it. If what you think the world needs is healing from ancestral trauma, you will try to reparent it. Like really the list goes on and on. The way that you understand the world is the way that you will approach it. And so both for what the world has in terms of blessings and maladies, ultimately I think this is a moment of inflection to sort of take a step back and to say, how do I see this world? How do I understand it? Because clearly I personally have been missing something. And it's okay to say that. Probably we wouldn't be here if we were so smart, if we'd gotten everything right. And it's a little bit beyond me to sort of put my finger on exactly where it is we need to go. But I think on the deepest level, what I'm saying to you is, I want you to have a little bit of a spiritual crisis too. Not a huge one. Don't go like moping in the streets. They'll call me. But I want you to have a spiritual crisis too, because this is a place that takes ideas seriously, this community. And I think it's worth taking these ideas seriously. Look, I was reading the Sfat Emet, my favorite Hasidic commentator, the third Rebbe of Ger, right? His commentary, which is kind of amazing because what you get is not a straightforward book, but actually all the years of his writing. He sort of wrote his commentary on the Torah in the form of a diary, and you can actually see his progression and expansion. In fact, the Sfat Emet often teaches the same thing over and over and over again, but every year he sort of expands on it a little bit. He is remarkable, and his sensitivity is absolutely remarkable. And you know what he says? He says, there's nothing in this world, nothing evil in this world that didn't begin with earnest intention from somebody who was trying to heal it. I think about that all the time. I'm a father, right? So, I'm so often right on principle. Obviously, I'm right. But what about the unintended consequences of my righteousness? The way that my children will hear it, the way that they'll respond to it, right? The way that they will internalize it. And there's nothing more heartbreaking as a parent than a week later you hear the kids saying the thing about themselves, right, that you said to them in a way that you know actually sort of left a mark, right? There's nothing worse than that. And it's something we do, not just as individuals, but I also think as communities as well on a national level. I mean, for those of us who can remember back, all the way back to 2001, when the war on terror was declared, a lot of people thought that was a great idea, and I was one of them. I remember sitting with my rabbinical school classmates and our dean and talking about, well, maybe we should go and invade Iraq, make the world safe for democracy. And now as the words are coming out of my mouth, I feel embarrassed even to share them in front of you, because we didn't think to foresee what our attempt to fix the world would ultimately create, right? We only thought about our own righteousness. We never thought about what came behind. And here's what the Sfat Emet says. He says, the world is built like this. He's actually, by the way, referencing Pharaoh's dream. It's not this week's Parsha, it's last week's Parsha, of the 7 fat cows and the 7 skinny cows. Skinny's the wrong word. Thank you. Emaciated, that's what I'm looking for. He says, they're really the same cow. He says, because everything in the world has its shadow. And unless you're willing to sort of understand the thing itself and the shadow that it casts, you haven't understood the thing. He says, the genius of Joseph, right, by the way, who's connected to Hanukkah and light casts shadow, is that Joseph understood both the light and the shadow. What does he say? He says there's going to be 7 amazing years, and there's going to be 7 awful years. Use the 7 amazing years to prepare for the 7 awful years. That's understanding light and shadow. And so he's ish chacham v'navon. He's a wise and understanding person because he understands the thing not only for its goodness, but also for its badness, and how to sort of accept both together. Have I done that? Have I been, in my well-intentioned way, as I preach about what we should do and trying to influence and this and that thing, and this is where we should go in life, have I thought about the shadow that I cast? In a way that it's often the most well-intentioned things that end up causing harm to people. I don't know. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say it's our values and it's our politics that have turned the world into what it is today. That's not what I'm trying to argue here. But I do want to say that I think this is a moment in which our job is to enlarge our understanding of the world around us such that we have a new moral framework in which we can say this is what ails the world and this is what is beautiful about it, and me and my shadow are going to both try to help. I don't think we have that yet. It was not my intention to depress everybody this particular Shabbat. And I hope, by the way, that's not the outcome of this drash as well. Because I want you to look deeper into the story of Joseph as a way of understanding what to do, how to feel, how to be in this particular moment. Remember, Joseph gets thrown in the pit not once, but he has to ride the same ride again too. And what must he have been thinking when he's thrown into prison the second time? How did I get here? What was what did I do wrong? How, and nonetheless, right, it's out of that second experience in the bore, in the pit, that he actually finds the nikudah. He finds the Sfat Emet calls it the Nekudat Esh, the fiery point inside himself that allows him to become second only to Paro in the end of it all. But imagine what he must have been feeling like on that first day of prison, you know? So what I ask you to do is go from this place, not at all with a sense that all is lost, but rather that with a sense that all is not understood. And really the job of this moment is to let our shells fall off, to molt, right? And to expand our consciousness of what the greatness and the brokenness of this world really is. And to dedicate ourselves to that. To really look with a fine eye and an understanding heart, even in the stuff that drives us absolutely crazy, to see if there's a nekudat esh inside of it, some sort of concern or love or instinct or goodness that we can harness even though it's gone bad. You know what he says, by the way, that bad times they're like? He said bad times are like a toddler who doesn't really know how to control their body and has fallen all over themselves and their limbs are in disarray. But ultimately, if you sort of work with that little baby and you stand them up and you put the limbs in the right order again, they will walk. And that's what I want to do, is to walk forward with you. Shabbat shalom.